Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. I'm Tyler James, and I'm joined once again by the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for InsideNDSports.com on the Rivals Network. Notre Dame is almost 2 weeks out from its season opener at Texas A&M, and we're exactly 2 weeks out from the debut episodes of Here Come the Irish, a new docuseries following Notre Dame football this season that will be streamed on Peacock. For some insight on the docuseries, we asked Aaron Horvath, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Media, Brand, and Communications, and advisor to the Athletic Director, to spend some time on this week's podcast. Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you guys having me. I'm so excited to be with a DePaul Tiger and I guess an Ohio State Buckeye as an Indiana grad. It's great to – I also worked at DePaul, so, Tyler and I have some sort of connection.
It's the Ohio State University to you.
Yeah, we don't learn those parts of grammar down south, so we're good.
Aaron, what should Notre Dame fans expect from Here Come the Irish? What should they hope to see and plan to see from this docuseries?
Yeah, our goal is the goal for this docuseries, is any good docuseries is to really take you inside the building that you want to be a part of and you want to see. Get to know student athletes, coaches, administrators potentially better, but overall just see your favorite team in a way that you've never seen it before. If we've joked about internally, it's kind of like a cross collaboration between Hard Knocks, if you've seen it, of course, with NFL Films Productions, and our Showtime series, a season with that we did in 2015. So it's going to have a lot of human elements to it. I just saw the second episode reel this morning, so got to see that's coming out here shortly. And it's really excited about what we can see, but it's really going to be about seeing your favorite players, favorite team, and kind of getting a little insight of places you don't normally see.
When you guys did the season with, and I think that was in 2015 with Team 127, I know Brian Kelly seemed to be really bullish on it until he realized he had to bring the microphone into the urinal with him. But how much did Marcus push for this, or was he more, I'm going to go along with this, I like the idea? So was he a driving force behind doing this, or was it other people and he said, yeah, I'm with you?
One of the great things about Coach Freeman, one of the many great things about Coach Freeman is he never turns down an idea off the bat. He always thinks about how this can help Notre Dame, the university as a whole, his team, his student athletes. He's so into the branding of his student athletes and making sure they're successful, whether they're going to be successful in the NFL, successful in branding themselves, or successful in the professional life outside of athletics. And this is just another opportunity to kind of show those student athletes and his head coach and his assistant coaches and associate coaches who will be a head coach someday. So he was super open to the idea. He was excited about the idea. He pushes for it. He's also a person that has definitely worked with Katie Lonergan, John Asher, John Farnaro, Shalika Shetty, our executive producers on the show, about ideas of how to do this. You'll see that in the episode 1 and 2. There's a lot of more intimate moments, if you will, that we probably don't know. And I don't know, even though I'm around the program from time to time, that Coach Freeman does day to day. And it's really kind of a cool little thing of him returning, maybe letters to fans that write into him, different gifts he gives, different meetings he has. You kind of saw that in the trailer the other day of his summertime meeting with Coach Holtz. And it's really, he helps us at the same time of things we don't know, that he's like, this might be something that our fans would be interested in. And I'm really excited to get, there's one part in the first episode I don't want to ruin, that kind of gave me chills the first time I saw it. And he's mic'd up and you hear this great intimate moment of him and one of his mentors. And it's just a really cool moment. I think people are going to be excited and really love seeing that when it comes out.
It's not him answering one of my questions in a press conference about injuries, is it?
Not yet. We actually have a full episode on that. I think it'll be episode 5, but we should check out the timeline and see what it is.
Aaron, I know there's plenty of new faces around Notre Dame since the Showtime series in 2015, but I'm curious, are there institutional lessons learned from doing other things like what the football program did with Bleacher Report, the series that the basketball program has done, and how has that informed how to make this maybe a better product?
Yeah, I've had the great opportunity to work with Jack Swarbrick, our outgoing that left in the end of June, athletics director, and he always pushed us to say, like, start fresh, don't worry about the past, think about what's right for the now. And one of the things about this is we are the first organization that's doing this all open books kind of conversation going forward about having this follow doc. And it's, how do we tell the best Notre Dame story? How do we tell the best story in general for the fan? And we'll continue doing that, whether it's with this or something else. What we've learned, though, is don't worry about what others do. Worry about what's best for this situation. This year's, if we may go 12-0, but things still might not be perfect through the 12-0. The record may be perfect, but the things might not be perfect. We need to make sure that those things are seen in a great light so that people understand what our student athletes and our coaches go through, because this isn't easy. You guys have a tumultuous job in August through December. Every day is different. Everything changes day to day, whether it's injuries or whether it's wins, losses, or whether it's just storylines that come out of nowhere. You got to kind of be on your heels at times. You're on your toes at times, and kind of move forward. And I think what we've learned from that is just be ready for it, and be collaborative with the team at a highest level possible so that they are bought into the same way. Just like you asked in your last question about Coach Freeman. He's bought in, we're bought in, and we're kind of moving forward with the best stories possible.
So in the announcement yesterday, they put out the dates, or you put out the dates, and we retweeted them. But the one thing that is noticeable and noticeably different than the Showtime series is no in regular season shows. So what was the intentionality about not having them? Was it to get away from maybe the distraction of doing that within the season?
The goal for doing the schedule how it was anything pretty much anything camp on, for the most part, is all going to be seen as a post show. Just like most, outside of Hard Knocks, that's kind of how most of them are, is you'll see them at the end. I mean, think about Welcome to Wrexham, right? It's like 9 months before you already know what's happening, and they're actually like playing the next season by the time you see it. And so the whole thought is how to create the best story, because not everyone is, our goal here is to expand the Notre Dame brand. It's not just to show, Notre Dame fans a new light. It's also to expand the brand to new people that might be just interested in college football, and they're looking for the storylines to it. They're going to know what's happened. So what's the difference between seeing it Tuesday when you knew it happened 3 days before, or seeing it 2 months? Your goal is to tell the best story. So we know that we're going to have 5 episodes to tell the best story, rather than maybe use 1 episode every 2 weeks, which you may lose. You may have to just jam in 3 great stories into 1 episode if you cut them up every 2 weeks. So the goal is to find the best storylines, the best examples, the things that people will gravitate towards, whether you're a Notre Dame fan or whether you're a college football fan, whether you love South Bend, whatever it may be. The goal here is to just tell the best story. And that way to do that is to create the best production. The one thing we are going to do, as we do here all the time, is have a post-action review and say, after this year, these 7 episodes, should we change next year? And we'll listen to the fans. We'll listen to what Peacock says. We'll talk to coach. We'll talk to our administrators here and see what's best going forward. Because again, this is a project we plan to do for all 6 years of our partnership with NBC.
Wow. Okay. And
there you go. There's your breaking news. There you go.
Okay, there you go. It's ongoing. It's not just this year. So here's the breaking news I want: is Jerry Tillery and Sheldon Day, are they available to be guest participants in this project?
Everyone's available, but the question is, are they willing to give their NIL, name, image, and likeness, to be a part of it? That's the question.
Okay.
You make it happen, Eric. We'll do it.
Okay.
Aaron, you mentioned already having seen some of what will be coming out in terms of episode 2. So a lot of the first 2 episodes has already been done. Not to give too much away, but are there any breakout stars that you can hint at in those first 2 episodes, and maybe even forecasting ahead who you think might be interesting characters to follow throughout the season when it ends up coming out in December?
Yeah, you've seen some of it in the trailer. We follow the quarterbacks and Riley and Carr, and we follow Kenny and with Jack Kaiser, a lot of different great student athletes that we have here. Howard Cross, Coach Freeman, our coordinators, our assistant coaches. It's not just our student athletes; it's also our coaching staffs. Some of our administrators will be part of it. But you'll start connecting with different student athletes in different ways. Right. Just like with any great sports star, like you may I'm a huge Ken Griffey Jr. fan growing up. I was like, that was my guy in baseball. I'm like, anything Ken Griffey Jr. does, I'm going with that. But it might be for a different reason than another fan of Ken Griffey Jr. The same thing you're going to find here. And so I really am excited to kind of have people see a new way of looking at Notre Dame student athletes and Notre Dame coaches and see them humanized in a different way going forward. And I think the first 2 episodes will really set the scene. The first 2 episodes really take you through, let's call it like the spring season through the summer and right before training camp. That's kind of the goal here, is right into training camp, at the beginning of training camp. And so you'll see a lot of that from spring game. You'll see a lot of that from what they do over the summer, our student athletes, our incoming student athletes, and see just an angle that you haven't seen in the past.
So I also want to throw this tidbit in. I've been around since they actually did something like this, although it was not super well done during the Tyrone Willingham era.
Oh, are you talking about the ESPN series?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is going to be horrible, Eric. I'm just going to say it. And Tyler and I are similar ages here. I was maybe in middle school during that time. So,
well, you didn't miss anything.
Maybe I TiVoed it for you. I don't remember whatever the terminology was back then. But yeah, it does go back a little bit, doesn't it? But I think that's the cool thing about being at Notre Dame, right? Is don't worry about what other people do. Worry about what you think is best for your program. And sometimes, it's not going to work out. But the goal is to try new things. I mean, the forward pass could have been really horrible, right? If it just gets picked off every time. But you know what? Thank goodness it worked out, because it makes the game heck of a lot funner.
Yeah, I think Woody went to his grade thinking the forward pass was still bad, but
there are people that are fans today that still think that, for what it's worth. Like option only.
So one thing I did want to talk about was back when Tyrone Willingham was around, there wasn't Peacock. And I know that there are fans that push back on even the concept of Peacock. The game every year, that's the Peacock game. I'm boycotting it. I'm, this. So how can you build the goodwill of the concept of Peacock? And is there a special offer for people to join Peacock so they can watch this?
I don't want to speak for Peacock. Okay. Great question, but I don't want to speak for Peacock. What I'll say is, one of the goals that we had during this conversation with NBC, and they're phenomenal partners. I want to get that out there. They're great partners. Any ideas that we have, they really latch onto and try to engage with. But one of the goals we want to do for people that engage with Peacock is giving them great Notre Dame content throughout the year. So if you subscribe to Peacock, you're going to get all the Notre Dame home games that stream directly on Peacock. You're going to get the exclusive Notre Dame game on Peacock. You get Blue Gold game. You get all the hockey games that are at home on Peacock. But also, what else do you get? And this is just adding more value to the Peacock subscription for a Notre Dame fan. And that's really what our goal was throughout this process, was not just to do a great piece that can really give our fans, like super serve our fans, if you will, but it's also to provide more value to them as they engage with Peacock, one of the leading streamers in the world.
Yeah, and I'll speak for Peacock because I have no ramifications for doing such, but I think Peacock is probably as popular as it's ever been, coming off of the Olympics with so much attention that was on the Olympics this year, and the different products that NBC was offering through Peacock. Sort of related to that, I'm curious, how much do you think it's important that this Notre Dame and NBC relationship, to make something like this work, has spanned so long, that there is sort of this trust in this long-standing relationship to be sort of open to something like this, and to trust what this product's going to look like, and how you can work with a partner like that to make something like this be the best version of itself?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it's 33 years this year. Could have made that number up, but I think it's 91. As an IU grad, I like to say IU and Notre Dame started the NBC. And that was the first game on NBC during the partnership. Pretty sure IU lost that game. I'm going to go on a limb and say that. And,
I covered it. They did.
Oh, okay.
Von Dunbar was good.
Yeah, I mean, IU's had some running backs over the years, but the thought process of that is it is a great partnership. It starts with the people. Whenever we have people at Notre Dame, we say, why is Notre Dame special? And it comes back to the people. And I'll say the same thing about NBC. across the board, whether it's NBC Sports, Rick Cordella's group, John Miller, Gary Quinn, the groups we've learned to know at Peacock, that we've just started working with over these last few years, and especially in their unscripted series over the last year during this process, have been phenomenal. And it's just been a great partnership to push back. One of the great things about it is they're willing to tell us when they need more, or when they need something different, or they need something, they're looking for something. They're never worried about hurting our feelings, because our goals are the same as theirs, just to create the best product. That's not just for this Peacock show that we're talking about now. That's for the live broadcast. We help our staff here at Notre Dame does a lot to support NBC, just as they do a lot to support us with our video board show, and it kind of goes back and forth. And what we do live, what we do in the middle of the games, what we've done with the Olympics, what we do with Blue Gold, Pro Day, a lot of things that happen with this all happen because of the collaboration. And we want to make sure that Notre Dame and NBC/Peacock are different and differentiating themselves from someone who's, a Big 10 school, an SEC school, a Big 12 school, an ACC school, whomever. We want to be different, and we want to have the best partnership out there. And we feel like that, due to the trust that we built up over those 33 years, we just continue showing it year over year.
Last one for me, Aaron. If this takes off, is there a chance you would do it with another sport? And I'll throw one out there, women's basketball, just because there's so much momentum in women's basketball, period. And at Notre Dame, there's so many cool personalities, and they're going to be really good this year.
Yeah, and to quote Tyler's favorite artist, Justin Bieber, I would say never say never. And that might not even be a quote. I don't even know. And in that same sense is, I would say never say never in that sense is, but it's not in our plan to do additional shows. And the reason is because of the resources required to do a show like this. You guys can look at information that comes out day to day about the budget of these shows normally, and they are in the high 6 figures to low 7 figures per episode usually. And so to do them at the quality level that we expect, the quality level that Peacock expects, it would require massive investment, no matter what sport we would add onto it. But we definitely have other teams, whether it's volleyball, hockey, men's hoops, women's hoops, men's soccer, women's soccer, men's lacrosse. You can go down the pipe, right, of all these different sports that could have great stories that I think we would have Notre Dame fans and others be really engaged with. I think that's something that we would be open to. And you can take a look at Full Swing, right? Shows there's a lot of people that that are intrigued by golf. The F1 show that I don't watch, but I know a ton of people are enamored by the F1 show. Is the new tennis show of the last 2 years. And so there are opportunities there, but it's not something that's on our Gantt chart of future production right now, but we're definitely open to it.
Aaron, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you one question, not about the docuseries, and that is your perspective on the transition from Jack Swarbrick to Pete Bevacqua as an advisor to the athletic director. You've probably know more about that transition than anyone not named Jack Swarbrick or Pete Bevacqua. What has it been like to see how those two guys have handled the responsibility of being the athletic director at Notre Dame and handing it off from one to the other?
Yeah, it was and I get to see that. I get to see Father Bob and Father at the same time. And it's been, John V. Meyer and Jack Brennan on the board part. And it's been a kind of at some point there's gonna be a case study about it, in my opinion. I won't read it because I'm not a great reader, but like HBR's Harvard Business Review is going to do a case study about this like really good transition of power, if you will. They both are the consummate professionals, Jack and Pete. I got to work with Jack for 5 or 6 years, gotten to work with Pete for a few years, and then knew him with NBC Sports. But they are two of the brightest people I've met, and two of the people that I've had the opportunity that really care about this place. And it's something that's really hard to find, to kind of put those two things together, really always trying to do the right thing for the university first, thinking about themselves and what people are coming back on themselves second. And it's been amazing to see. I still text with Jack, see Pete every day, but they both are still trying to do what's best for the university no matter what. One of the great things, about them is they just have known each other. They get along. They still talk to each other about just throwing things off of one another to ensure that things were going. When Jack was the AD, when Pete is the AD now, they're still working off each other. They get to things different ways. They both are thinkers in their own way, but it's the collaborative nature of both of them that is amazing. They bring in people around them. They don't want people to always agree with them. And I think that's a sign of a great leader of, I'm going to tell you what I think, and now I need you guys to poke holes in it. And we definitely will. And they'll continue going back and forth. And it's one of those things that I love. And as a big West Wing fan growing up, and one of the quotes I love in there, and I said this to someone this morning, was, I'll give, if the boss said to their employee, I'll give you all the time in the world to set me straight, but once I make a decision, I expect you to go sell it. And that's one of the things I love about both of them, is that they will always give you all the time in the day to tell you what your thoughts are, why, what you're going through in the future. But when they make a decision, it's our responsibility to go and put that out there as much as possible. And I couldn't have asked for two better bosses, my last two bosses, than Jack and Pete.
My hope for Pete Bevacqua that he has as good a taste in music as Jack Swarbrick has, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I can't wait for him to get on the podcast. And so here's the thing. Jack liked music, and most of us didn't know what the heck Jack was talking about with music. He brought up the third album off a deep track of like a Dave Matthews Band cut from like Modesto, California in 1994. And then Pete loves movies. And so just like Jack likes music, Pete likes movies. And I've learned a lot from Jack on the movie or the music part, like started listening to Jason Isbell and John Prine, and he likes Chris Stapleton and groups that I never would have thought about listening to prior to 3 to 4 years ago. And as you guys know, I think he did a podcast maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and you asked him Taylor Swift, or who was the other one? Do you remember?
The Ramones. Come on,
Ramones.
Eric's favorite.
Yeah. And he picked the Ramones, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So when
foolish decision.
Yeah, no one's perfect. That's what I like to say. So when you get Pete on the podcast here in the next few weeks, months, like we got to make sure that you guys have your 2 movies ready to go and see what he thinks.
All right. Sounds like
we won't do the obvious one. The Ramones were in a movie called Rock and Roll High School, and Taylor Swift has her era tour in theaters. But
you know what, Eric, I'm glad you didn't say Cats, because I think that was I think she was in Cats as well. That I think was Tyler's top 5 movies of all time. I don't think Bill Simmons did that on the rewatchables yet, but we'll get there. Okay.
All
right, Aaron, we got to kick you off the podcast now. You're starting to insult Taylor Swift. So, all right, thanks a lot, Aaron. Have a good one.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks so much.
Before we get to our question segment, I wanted to alert our listeners to the subscription promo we're running on InsideNDSports.com. If you sign up for a new annual subscription by Friday night, you'll get your first year for just $24. That's a savings of nearly $76 from the annual subscription price. A subscription gets you all the access you need, from our premium content to the Insider Lounge message board, and you don't have to wait for the next podcast to ask us a question. You can take advantage of this offer by using promo code NDCamp24 when you sign up for an annual subscription to InsideNDSports.com. And do so quickly, because this deal expires Friday night. You can find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. Let's take a moment to tell you about our new partner, Autograph. You can now find Inside Indie Sports content on the Autograph app, which is free to download on Android and iOS devices. The company, co-founded by Tom Brady, believes that devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to the fans. You can download the app using the QR code at the bottom of our screen or using the link listed in the video description and find our content in the Notre Dame community. Make sure you use the referral code INDS so Autograph knows we sent you. All right, now it's time for questions. You can submit questions to us on Twitter or the Insider Lounge message board before every podcast. I'm at TJamesND and Eric's at EHansenND. First question I have for us, Eric, is from LDL Go Irish on the Insider Lounge. I was looking at Texas A&M's offensive line, and it had more talent than I thought. They have a returning entrenched left tackle, Trey Zune, and a returning right tackle, Ruben Fothery, that was injured last season. In addition, they have the player who filled in at right tackle last year and claimed freshman All-American and freshman SEC awards, Chase Pasantis, and will move to a guard this season. Chase was highly recruited and has a powerful lower body. How do they match up with the ND D-line talent? We all know ND needs to control that line of scrimmage and stop the run.
Yeah, Chase actually was recruited by Notre Dame and they didn't get to the end with him, but they thought highly of him. I think Notre Dame's defensive line, especially with its depth, is going to be a handful for anybody's offensive line. I mean, you have an All-American in Howard Cross. You have similar potential with a defensive lineman or defensive tackle in Riley Mills. You have waves of edge rushers. The edge guys are the ones who have the most to prove, but there's talent and options there. And I think you have to pair it with the whole front seven. I think Notre Dame's linebackers are very fast and athletic when you pair with the defensive line. Texas A&M is going to have their hands full, but you're right. I mean, Texas A&M's offensive line is a good talent there.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm not nearly as familiar with Texas A&M's offensive line as I am Notre Dame's, but I think if you looked at Notre Dame's talent on paper, Notre Dame has a very talented offensive line. But for those of us who follow Notre Dame closely and have watched these guys, you don't necessarily feel that way. So I think there are questions about Texas A&M's offensive line, just like there's questions about Notre Dame's offensive line, and I think there are fewer questions about Notre Dame's defensive line. So whether or not Chase Basantis got All-American freshman All-American honors last year, I mean, I can't speak. I haven't spent a ton of time watching this film, but there probably aren't a lot of candidates as freshman All-Americans on the offensive line either, just because it's not a position that a lot of freshmen play, especially if you're playing it in the SEC. That's obviously a good accomplishment, but that doesn't mean he was playing well. Certainly, his PFF grade indicated he wasn't playing well. He had a 46.5 as a pass blocker and a 59 as a run blocker. So I could run through PFF grades. None of them had high grades last year of the projected starters. Um, the two tackles were the best. Trey Zune last year, and then Ruben Fothery actually was hurt last year and played more in 2022, and those guys were in the 77s as pass blockers and lower 70s as run blockers. So we'll see. But yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to have the advantage there. And if Notre Dame doesn't have an advantage there, then that's going to be a problem. All right. Next question is from Bob_Oxnard on the Insider Lounge. Fahrenheit, what is the highest temperature during an ND game you can recall? And number two, since it has been 100 every day in College Station, will high temperatures during the game hurt us more than them?
Bob, I have to be honest with you. I remember the cold games and the rainy games much, and the hurricane games way more than the hot games. I don't have a great recollection for it and couldn't find it handily. I know when I talked to Kevin White about scheduling, this was before Jack Swarbrick took over, and I think he tried to avoid it was trying to avoid playing in the South in September, or in this case, late August. I can tell you the average temperature for August 31st in College Station, Texas, as a high of 97 and a low of 77. So I would think this would qualify. But I mean, the one thing that Marcus Freeman has to feel really good about is how deep his team is, and that he'll flex his depth in this game, both offensively and defensively at most of the positions. And the other thing is Texas A&M has to play in the same hot weather.
Yeah, I would imagine that Texas A&M is more acclimated to that, having done that more often. So yeah, I mean it's going to be an advantage for A&M. How much I think could be dictated by like how the game is going, right? If Notre Dame's controlling the line of scrimmages, then they're probably not getting as phased by the temperature. And so I don't. I think we're just guessing in terms of how much it'll actually impact the game. The game that came to mind to me was at Texas in 2016. And I looked it up. I don't know if this is actually the highest one of a game that I've covered or not, but that was just the game that came to mind first to look up. And that game was 91 degrees at kickoff, according to the box score from that game. So
And that was a night game, right?
yeah, that was a night game, just like this one will be. So that one didn't end well for Notre Dame either, but Notre Dame obviously was in that game till the end. So I don't know if the weather played a toll on Notre Dame, as we saw the rest of the season. Both teams weren't
I think it
exactly
was the defensive coordinator that played a toll on them.
yeah. The offense played well in that game, but the defense certainly didn't. All right, next question is from @Charles W. Wolf. What sort of offensive scheme are we expecting from Texas A&M? I saw the running back was hurt, but wasn't really sure what their projected offensive identity was going to be and how that injury may affect things.
So Colin Klein, who was at Kansas State through much of his career, both as a player and a coach, he was one of the few coaches that was considered for the offensive coordinator opening when Tommy Rees left, and even came in for an interview. And why he was a match was because Marcus felt like he was similar to how Marcus wanted to play football, similar to what Notre Dame had been doing. And so he wanted to take a closer look. From what I've read and seen about Colin Klein, is he designs his offense around quarterback strengths to the point that he's even played two quarterbacks at different times if that quarterback doesn't have everything that he needs to get out of his quarterbacks. He's into ball control like Notre Dame is, multiple position groups to find mismatches. He does tend to have uncommon offensive line splits. I'm not sure if they're doing that at Texas A&M. He likes offensive linemen who can move and pull. And I don't know that it's going to change with the running back being hurt. I think they're hoping that one of the other running backs can step up. They were going to play multiple running backs, and I still think the game plan will be similar both for Notre Dame's game and for the season.
Yeah, I think Colin Klein wants to be balanced. They were good. Kansas State was good at rushing the football the last two seasons. It was a top 15 team in rushing offense in both of those seasons. Deuce Vaughn had a lot to do with that in 2022, a very talented running back. And then DJ Giddens was the leading running back for Kansas State last year. I would expect multiple running backs to be used. So yes, the Owens injury hurts, which I know is part of our next question as well. But I do think Texas A&M is going to want to try to run the ball. I don't think he's going to Colin Klein is going to intentionally want to be pass happy, and certainly we'll see what that looks like. I think it's obviously guessing because we haven't seen him at Texas A&M, and there are some other new coaches on the staff coming together to see if that sort of changes what this offense looks like. So our best guess is that, but certainly if A&M feels like there's some weaknesses within Notre Dame's defense, which would seemingly be hard to find, maybe that's how they tailor their opening game sort of plan. All right. Next question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. How big of a loss is Ruben Owens for Texas A&M? Is it comparable to the Jagusa loss for ND? Can you both give your impressions of Armel Mukum?
I think Owens' loss is going to hurt them over the long haul of the season. But again, they may have somebody that steps up that gets an opportunity from it. I think the Jagusa injury, at least in the opener, would seem to be a much more significant miss for Notre Dame than Texas A&M's injury, because I don't know that the person yet behind Charles Jagusa is comparable. We're not even sure yet for sure that that's Tosh Baker, but I just think the Jagusa injury is bigger. My impression of Armel Mukum, big, strong kid, came in kind of as an edge guy that they thought would move inside. He's put on weight, and he's pushed himself into the edge of the rotation at interior defensive line. He hasn't played a lot of football. He's a Canadian. He played a lot of hockey in his youth and so forth growing up, but went to high school in the States and has a fast learning curve. So far he's a real curiosity to me.
Yeah. Owens, I think, is a big name with maybe a promising future, but it's not like he was an established force in Texas A&M's offense. He was third on the team in rushing last year behind Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels, who are both back this season. So they had options in the Texas A&M backfield. This just eliminates one of them, Whereas I don't think we feel as strongly about the other options that Notre Dame has at left tackle. So I think the Jagosa loss is much more significant. As for Mucom, I've been surprised by what we've seen. He's a big body, strong. He's a tough guy to move. He's certainly gained a lot of weight since he's come to Notre Dame. But I feel like we've only seen glimpses, so I don't know that I can write a long story about Mucom at this point. But someone that sort of has risen from someone that we weren't even really thinking about coming into fall camp. Next question is from NWI_Irish96 on the Insider Lounge. How is the offensive line looking without Jagusa? Do you think the play calling will have to change without him?
Given the sample size that we've seen of competitive offensive line play against competitive front seven play, I would say it's really difficult to tell. And what happened in practice today and a little bit on Saturday makes it a little bit more confusing because we saw some different people on the left side of the line working with the ones, and we're still not sure whether Sam Pendleton working at left guard and Anthony Knapp, a true freshman, working at left tackle during the tempo drill was some mixing and matching, or is this foretelling of the direction that they're going to go on August 31st? We'll have that answer for you on Saturday. But
maybe,
yeah, maybe, but I'm seeing, in the drills and so forth, I'm seeing good learning and good movement. I mean, I remember it seemed like this time last year, Joe Rudolph was cussing and yelling more, but that's the biggest indicator that we have at this point. I think it's good that some of these guys like Sullivan Absher and Garby Lambert that are young, talented players are getting an opportunity to move up the depth chart. But and I'm very confident in Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig. And from there, I probably would need to see more, and I'm not going to get a chance to see that. So I'll be surprised with you, NWI.
Yeah, I mean, I think confusing is a good word to describe Notre Dame's offensive line, at least from what we've seen, just because we haven't seen a lot of it. We've seen the different lineups with the people playing on the left side, like you mentioned today, and some on this past Saturday. So I don't know what to think of it, and we're not going to get to see more. We didn't see a ton to begin with, other than who was lining up where. So I know I've been pretty negative about the offensive line, but I'm just telling you what I've seen or haven't even seen. So I don't want to have blind faith about a position that I already had questions about. Even though Notre Dame's offensive line is historically pretty good. But and that's fine. Like, Joe Rudolph's job is not to prove to me by August 15th that the offensive line is going to be fine this year. His job is to get these guys ready for the Texas A&M game at the end of the month and continue to build from there. So I think we're all going to learn together how good this offensive line is. I don't know that those of us who are given some viewing opportunities in preseason camp will have a better sense than those of you who are sitting at home. I know that might be discouraging. And you're like, hey, well, what are we listening to you guys for then? But I think that's just the way things are and the way things have been set up for this preseason.
Yeah, we've got to be honest. We have a lot fewer opportunities to watch than we've had in some of the past years. So
yeah, and I mean, you can take it as a complaint, like that's just the fact of the matter. I mean, we can only go when they let us go. Now we can obviously continue to try to report on what people are thinking about the offensive line and what's going on if we can get some information from behind the scenes. But again, I think that's more sort of blind faith when I think, especially on the offensive line, I think people want to see improve it. So that's what we'll be entering the season looking for. Go ahead.
The second part of the question was, do you think the play calling will have to change without Jagaza? I don't think so. I mean, yes and no. There may be times where you have to have an extra tight end in the game. So maybe your formations are a little bit different. But I still think Notre Dame wants to do certain things with its offense. And I think they have to be able to function that way And I think it's more about finding the right left tackle than it is changing your offense because you have the wrong one.
Yeah, I mean, I think and we've talked about this before. I think Notre Dame was going to go into the season with a plan to not expose its offensive line in some of its inexperienced areas or maybe weaker areas. And so I think this only just exaggerates that a little bit more, but I don't know that it changes it a ton. So I think that Notre Dame's gonna try to protect its offensive line by being able to run the football, run with the quarterback, and obviously get rid of the ball as best it can to not put Riley Leonard in harm's way and not put the offensive tackles in bad pass blocking situations. All right. The next question is from Bert Leonard at Bert2834. If Tosh Baker ends up being as good as Joe Alt as the fourth string left tackle freshman, who was obviously very good, what is the ceiling for the team? What is the floor if he is closer to Sam Young's freshman year?
So this is like one of those word problems that gave me trouble in math. And I think it's a good question, how you're asking it. But I don't think that's as simple as isolating Tosh Baker and hinging the season on Tosh Baker. I think there's the left guard has to be really good. Riley Leonard has to be a guy that's more evolved than he was at Duke last year. There's a lot of things, the wide receivers need to be as productive as we thought they might be once we saw the additional speed and the depth there. So I don't want to hang this all on Tosh Baker and say that's an 11-win team if Tosh Baker is Joe Alt and a 10-win team if it's Sam Young. I just think there's more to it. It's a very important position, but to me, I'm unable to answer your question the way it's phrased to your satisfaction.
Well, maybe you don't speak for Bert. Bert could be satisfied with the answer. I think I agree with you, but I also think like Tosh Baker is sort of can be or could be emblematic of the job Joe Rudolph is doing, right? If Tosh Baker is a very good left tackle for Notre Dame, then I think I would assume that the rest of the offensive line is doing pretty good too, because I think like that is more maybe the biggest question mark going into the season right now is the left tackle. So if Joe Rudolph's able to get Tosh Baker ready, shouldn't he be able to also get Rocco Spindler ready, Ashton Craig ready, and Emil Wagner? So I think you could sort of say like, well, if he gets Tosh Baker to play at a high level, then maybe the rest of the offensive line is also playing well too. If you're sort of making those hypothetical assumptions, so I would go to say like if Notre Dame has a good left tackle, it can win a playoff game. And if it has a bad left tackle, it can miss the playoff. I think those are reasonable ceilings and floors for those scenarios. So maybe being
And
more.
you can equate it to Joe Alt as a freshman and Sam Young as a freshman.
I mean, no, not necessarily because I wasn't watching Sam Young's freshman year the same way I watched Joe Alt's freshman year, but yeah, I mean, I think like if you have a serviceable left tackle, and that's not a concern for you, which I don't think left tackle was a concern for Notre Dame at the end of Joe Alt's freshman year. I
When
think
was the last time left tackle really was a concern? It was
the beginning of that season,
the beginning of that season, and
right?
then in the decade that has surrounded the beginning of that season, it hasn't been. So this has been an unusual thing. I mean, when you think about the left tackles that are, I mean, 4 years of Zach Martin there, and you had Liam Eichenberg, and you had
Ronnie
Mike
Stanley, Mike
Glengie, Ronnie
McGlinchey,
Stanley. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, it's been a pretty good run.
Yeah, and they've had answers, and we just don't think that the answer is there right now. And Blake Fisher was going to be the answer that year that Joe Alt ended up emerging as the starter, but Blake got hurt. Tosh Baker jumped in, he got hurt. Michael Carmody jumped in, he got hurt. And Joe Alt was sort of the last man standing there and more than held his own. So there can be more than one way to get to the right answer. But I think, especially for Notre Dame to win the A&M game, it needs to hope that the right answer is already made by the time that the season opener starts. All right, next question is from @Enforcers2117. All right. I haven't heard much about special teams. How has Mitch Jeter looked? Spencer Schrader and Jonathan Dorr had big legs, but I had to hold my breath until I knew it was good or not. How does he compare to them?
Jeter missed a couple inside today from long range, and not because they were short. When he's been outdoors, he's looked pretty good when we've seen him this month. He's added some range. He does have a really good history of being consistent, 23 of 25 in his 2 years as South Carolina's main kicker on field goals. And he's also played in Kyle Field twice in his career. So I feel pretty good about what he's going to do in games.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the two that he missed today, the Thursday morning's practice that we saw was a 55-yarder from the right hash and a 42-yarder from the left hash. And both of those sailed left. But he had plenty of leg on him. It wasn't like he can't get the ball that far. So he hasn't jumped out to me like, okay, Mitch Jeter's like locked in. I haven't, but anytime we see field goals, I try to watch them. And so he misses a couple here or there, but that's not crazy uncommon. I mean, he's working with a new holder. And so we'll see if everything, we'll see if everything lines up for him by the time the season gets going. But yeah, like you said, the history that he's had the last two seasons would lead you to believe that Notre Dame should be able to be pretty confident in him.
You know what's sneaky, Tyler, is that Chris Salerno changed his number, who's the holder, to 26. You know who else is 26?
Who else?
Tyler Buckner. They could sneak Tyler Buckner in there for a fake.
I'd have to imagine they probably wouldn't be wearing the same number on game day if that's how it ends up playing out, but that's not a bad plan you got there, Eric. Yeah. All right. Our last question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. Now that we're approximately halfway through camp, can you please each give your biggest positive and negative surprise?
I mean, even if Anthony Knapp is the number 2 left tackle, he to me is the biggest surprise. Jaden Harrison has been a big surprise for me. I don't know that that's universally among everybody, but for me, he really kind of caught my eye, and he didn't as much in the spring. And maybe the continuation of Adon Schuler to the point that he may actually start. Those would be the good surprises. The bad surprises, I'm not sure that there's been a bad surprise. I mean,
yeah,
there's been not, I mean, that the offensive line isn't making us say, oh gosh, they're going to be in the Joe Moore Award finalists. I mean, we expected that not to be the case, so that wouldn't be a surprise. But not a lot of negatives other than injuries at this point. I mean, you're splitting hairs at a lot of positions trying to find icky surprises.
Yeah, the negative surprise was tough because like a lot of the questions that we had coming into camp are still the questions. I don't know that there's new questions in terms of like question marks about this team. With the offensive line, I'd probably just say in general we don't exactly know who the starting 5 is, right? I mean, I think we thought we did, and then the last 2 times we showed up to practice, we're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
And it kind of flied in the face with what Joe Rudolph said in the interview.
Yeah, that's like my biggest reason to not necessarily be like maybe what we're seeing doesn't actually matter. Like because Rudolph seemed pretty adamant that Tosh Baker's our left tackle. Here we go. And that
because
we
I
didn't
even
talk to him
asked
that
him, I
long
said,
ago.
that's an audition. Yeah, it was a few days before that Saturday practice. And I mean, he was high on Anthony Knapp and he talked about him, but he also thought maybe his future would eventually be as an inside guy. But I mean, there were a lot of Anthony Knapp questions, but he didn't say, you know what, he may take this whole thing over.
Right. And even the left guard spot, right? Like I think at least I sort of thought that, okay, I think it's Rocco Spindler's job, but like that hasn't been the case. Like why is Sam Pendleton taking number 2 or first team left guard reps while Rocco Spindler's taking second team left guard reps if it's Rocco's job? I don't really know what's going to happen there for certain. So like I said earlier, like that's not for Joe Rudolph doesn't have to show us and prove to us what this offensive line is going to be at this point of the preseason. But That's just where we're at right now. In terms of positive surprise, I went with Newcomb. The Knapp thing, I think is a good one. I'm just like, it goes back to like, is he just there because there's no one else? Like, I just don't really know, like, how good is Anthony Knapp, or is Notre Dame's left tackle situation just that
Who was your
uncertain?
positive surprise?
I don't know if I got to it yet.
Oh,
Armel
Newcomb.
Mucum is who
Okay.
I would say, like, he was just not a guy that was on my radar, and just like, I think maybe beyond Mucum, that just like that Gabriel Rubio isn't going to be healthy to start the season. It isn't really a concern to me, and I think maybe if you had asked me that 3 months ago, I would have been like, I don't know, they probably need Gabriel Rubio, but it's not really a concern to me right now. And so I think that's probably a positive surprise.
The I'll throw one more in there because it happened in an interview, not so much from observation. When I was interviewing Ben Morrison today, I just kind of casually asked him about Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore, and he goes, "I think Leonard Moore has a chance to be better than me here." And I go, "Why?" And he kind of went down the list, and he goes, "Now I don't want to put pressure on him." And I'm biased because he's my roommate and I'm giving him advice, but here's why I think he could be really, really, really good here. And then I thought, I need a second opinion. So I went over and talked to Jaden Thomas, and he said the same thing and gave more reasons. So that would be a surprise if Leonard Moore is contributing in some fashion and turns out to be better than Ben Morrison, because Ben Morrison is really good.
That's the one that trips me up. Like, I can see Ben Morrison saying that about another corner, but Jaden himself said he could be better than Ben Morrison. Like, he said those words.
Jaden Thomas?
Yes.
I'm have to go back over the tape, but yes, he kind of framed it similarly. I don't know that he said it exactly the
But he,
same.
but he wasn't asked like, "Hey, can Leonard Moore be better than Ben Morrison?" Was it presented
I
to him in
said
any
Ben
way?
Morris. I presented the question to him. I said Ben Morrison said he thinks that Leonard Moore could end up being better.
Okay, so he
To be
echoed.
So yeah, he didn't
He
like just
echoed it.
throw
He
it
didn't just
out there.
come out of. It didn't come from
He goes,
nowhere. Okay.
he goes, yeah. He said, you know what? When he first came in, I was thinking the same thing. And he said,
Okay.
here's why. He goes, he's really tough on press coverage. He goes, Ben's smart. He goes, not that Leonard's not smart. He goes, but Leonard just has this way about knowing how to play, and he's got length. He goes, his length is really a problem.
Got it.
And so it was really interesting. I mean, he had high praise for him. Let's put it that way.
Sure. No, and that praise is still like, it doesn't, whether or not he says he's better than Ben Morrison or whatever, but like the fact that the praise is there, and that.
I mean,
Well,
if he had said he's better than Jaden Mickey, it would have, in time. I think that's pretty
sure.
high praise.
Yeah, exactly. And it always raises my eyebrow when Notre Dame promotes a freshman on like social media. Like Leonard Moore, there was a Leonard Moore clip pretty early on in camp, and I feel like now maybe I'm just thinking of the Brian Kelly days more, when he's like, "What did Kyle Hamilton do? I didn't see it." But
Yeah.
like they put a Leonard Moore interception on social media pretty early on, and usually like it's not just a one moment that they're like, "We got a good clip here, so let's run it." I think there's some thought behind. Okay, this person is worth like giving some publicity to. And so that whenever that happens, I always say, Leonard Moore must be doing pretty good beyond just this one play that we're getting a glimpse of on social media.
The one thing I'll also say is Mike Mickens had a track record of Cincinnati
Yep.
of getting freshmen ready to play early, and he's done it at Notre Dame, and he consistently does it.
Yep. So I think Leonard Moore is answering the concerns about Notre Dame's fourth cornerback options, that I think we're legitimate going into the preseason camp. All right, that's it for today's episode of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. If you don't already, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, give us a star rating, leave a review, and share our podcast feed with someone who has a Peacock subscription. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering the first year of an annual subscription to InsideNDSports.com for just $24. The deal expires Friday night, so take advantage of it with promo code NDCamp24. We'll march into next week, the last of the preseason, with another Football Never Sleeps on Monday night and an Inside ND Sports podcast later in the week. In the meantime, we have plenty of written content to enjoy as well. So stick with InsideNDSports.com for all your Notre Dame football coverage needs.